back, Internet Land. This is the Mother Brain of the Mother Brain Files, and I'm here today to talk about my latest movie review on the 5th installment of the Die Hard franchise, A Good Day to Die Hard, starring Bruce Willis. This is probably going to be the toughest review that I've ever done in the times that I've been doing these blogs lately, because this movie was just a complete disappointment. And we're going to get into that right away as to how this came about and why I feel this film unfortunately destroyed a great franchise, which is Die Hard. So we go back to 1988 when Die Hard was first released, and I remember I was a kid when I only saw it on home video. Die Hard set a brand new standard for the way action films were to be produced in the late 80s and early 90s. This wasn't the typical Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone type character with the big muscles and the big bazookas, but John McClane was an everyman type of character, a guy who had to rely on his wits and rely on his own abilities as a cop, and to be put into an extraordinary situation that he may not even be able to survive, and to have a smart villain as Alan Rickman had played as Hans Gruber really made something extra spicy and something fresh and exhilarating for that time. And it set off a whole wave of knockoffs: Die Hard on an airplane, Die Hard on a boat. Then you had Die Hard 2, in which now you have John McClane in an airport fighting terrorists. It's still a mildly entertaining film with some great action scenes, and of course it was a far more financially successful film than the original. Unfortunately, it does suffer from not as many great villains, and the same type of problems take place with the wife being in danger and having the same reporter asshole trying to get his big story, even if it has to endanger innocent people. 1995 brought Die Hard with a Vengeance, which everybody has a mixed opinion about, but I consider it to be up there with the original. It brought something new to the table with McClane and Samuel L. Jackson's character Zeus running around New York City defusing bombs being put together by Hans Gruber's brother, played by Jeremy Irons. And so you had a very great, exciting movie with that New York City flavor to it, and it was just a new way to reinvent the franchise without it being Die Hard in a building, but now the scope is much more wider. And it's a very smart movie where you think it's going to go one way and then it twists into a whole different direction. Then between 95 and 2007 there was a long gap where there was a lot of trouble trying to get a fourth movie made, but finally it happened with Free or Die Hard. And this one, as we know, also has its own mixed share of critics. You had the direction of Len Wiseman, who brought together a 21st century version of Die Hard, the idea of John McClane in the digital age, having to fight digital terrorists. And many critics complained about how the film totally removed John McClane from his original characterization, going from the everyman that we grew up with in the original 3 films, and now making him more like a Schwarzenegger type of character, flipping cars into helicopters, and hovering off of an F-14, which, you know, he goes from everyman to a daredevil cop. But it was still an entertaining action film. You had an interesting villain. I liked the dynamic between Bruce Willis and Justin Long. So it was a pretty entertaining film. Even with the PG-13 rating, which everybody complained about, it was still kind of a hard-hitting action movie for this particular time. And then A Good Day to Die Hard. I don't know where to start other than the fact that this movie, I'm still pissed off even after having seen it just about 2 days ago from this time of this recording. So you have a political prisoner in Russia who refuses to give away this important file that can incriminate a corrupt politician, so he gets thrown into jail and he's supposed to go on trial. And at the same time you have John McClane's son Jack attempting a failed assassination on this corrupt politician, and he goes into jail and is supposed to be on trial at the same time as this political criminal. You got John McClane still in New York. I don't even know if he's retired or whatever, but he gets the word about his son's imprisonment, and they supposedly have a very estranged relationship, as in the case in the other movies with the wife and with the daughter, and he goes to Russia to go and try to get him out of trouble. But then, of course, another round of terrorists come about. They storm the courthouse. They try to assassinate everybody. And McClane's caught up in the middle of it and ends up reuniting with his son and this political prisoner. And that's when we find out that McClane's son is part of the CIA, and this is all part of an operation to get a hold of this file. Everything is a problem with this movie, from the piss-poor direction of John Moore, a studio hack at 20th Century Fox, the piss-poor screenwriting of Skip Woods, best known for such classics as X-Men Origins Wolverine, The A-Team, and the guilty pleasure known as Swordfish. And then you have Bruce Willis, one of the greatest action movie actors of all time. A man who has just come off some of the best films of his career. Red, Looper, which I praised the hell out of last year, Moonrise Kingdom. And this is the franchise that made him a star. A franchise that took him from the television days of moonlighting in the 80s to making him the biggest star in the world, and breaking the door down for many TV stars to make that jump into film. Because at that time, if you failed with one movie, you were back on television right away. But now you have Bruce Willis just literally, with this great character, phoning in his performance. It's like he doesn't want to be there. He's just tired throughout the whole film. The character that we remember in that first movie, who's hiding up those elevator shafts and taunting Hans Gruber, yippee-ki-yay and all that, now it just seems so phony to me. And it just felt like everything that came out of him was forced, and he was even too smart in comparison to these terrible bad guys, who were just not memorable at all. And I just feel like he was just collecting a paycheck, like he didn't want to be there. There are times, literally in this film, where it just seemed like somebody dubbed over his voice in moments that seemed unnecessary. I couldn't even tell you who's who, or why they have motivations for what they're doing. I just watched that movie, and I had such a hard time following it, between that and the ADD editing that is the MTV style of today. The rapid fire 2-second shot and then cut to the next shot. Everything's a close-up, so there's no scope of the entire movie like in the first couple of films, especially the first movie, where you really felt the tallness and the imposingness of the Nakatomi Plaza building. You don't have any of that in this movie. If there are any redeeming values, and there really aren't that many, I did enjoy some of the stunt work, in particular the scene in Russia with the Jeeps and McClane rolling around in this Mercedes Jeep trying to get through all the traffic, and literally like a Monster Mash derby rolling through all the cars. You also have the introduction of John McClane's son, Jack, played by Jai Courtney, an Australian actor who was just recently the villain in Jack Reacher with Tom Cruise, and also was part of the series Spartacus on Starz Network. I didn't mind him that much. I kind of liked the dynamic between him and Bruce, even though there were times where I felt it was kind of forced. And other times I thought he looked like my favorite wrestler, Daniel Bryan, but that's just me. He was not annoying. He wasn't Shia LaBeouf in Indiana Jones, The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. He kind of held his own. He has a good action physique to himself. And he had the beautiful Mary Elizabeth Winstead make a brief cameo in the film, reprising her role as Lucy from Live Free or Die Hard. But it's still not enough to save this garbage film that feels more like a straight-to-DVD movie. Again, there's really nothing redeeming about it when you think about the fact that it's 90 minutes. It's like the shortest that any of these Die Hard films have ever been, which I think should tell you a lot about how Fox feels about this franchise now. And then you have it released in February as opposed to the previous films being released in the summer, which again is odd. Putting it out on Valentine's Day? I mean, who's the target audience for this movie now? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I had to think about this long and hard, no pun intended, and I decided A Good Day to Die Hard deserves a 1.5 stars. I'll give it some points on the things that I felt were okay, like McClane's son, and of course some of the stunt work. But this film really is, to me, what the Deadpool was to the Dirty Harry franchise. It's just so poorly executed. It's so remotely removed from the previous Die Hard films. It just feels like they just slapped the name on there, brought in Bruce Willis, and probably gave him a shot of Valium just so he could get through his performance. And there you go, you got a Die Hard movie. But it really isn't. Even as I'm watching the movie and trying to connect it to the other films, I can't. It just feels totally out of the way of what those movies were to me. And lastly, I want to close this out with my own personal message to Bruce Willis. And I know he probably won't watch this because he's too busy collecting his paychecks. Bruce, I do look forward to G.I. Joe Retaliation, and I certainly look forward to Red 2. And you are one of my heroes, one of my inspirations growing up. I love Moonlighting. I love the Die Hard films. I even loved your performance in Death Becomes Her, because that was totally different from anything you had done up until that time. But Bruce, this is the movie that made you a star. You have millions of fans all over the world. And you're so successful. I mean, you went from being a bartender in New York and struggling doing these plays on Broadway, and now you've become too successful to the point where you're doing these straight-to-DVD films for a paycheck, and then you decide to go back to the franchise that made you a star and decide you're going to sleepwalk through it, that you're just going to phone in your performance as John McClane, the everyman that everybody related to back in 1988? Bruce, I don't even want another Die Hard movie anymore, because I feel like you're not going to give us what we want. Bring back some of the old characters. Bring back Holly. Bring back Al Powell. Rachel Bell Johnson needs a job. Hell, bring back Argyle. You know, all these guys we will remember and somehow bring to the forefront and create some great villains again, for Christ's sake. You know, people still love these films, or else it wouldn't have had the big opening weekend that it had. So don't insult the audience's intelligence. This is your baby. This is your franchise. This is the reason why your name is known all over the world. Why everybody goes out and when they see your face, they think Die Hard. They call you John McClane. People pay for you to see you. And that's why you're making the money that you're making today. This is why you're living the way you are. This is why you have all your celebrity friends. And as far as I'm concerned, I am very disappointed with this film. Very disappointed with 20th Century Fox. And I'm sincerely disappointed with you, Bruce. And I love you, man. But seriously, stop phoning in your performances. Start giving us the good quality material that you've been giving us since the 1980s. Bring that back. I know you're a little bit older, and I know the audience is different, and everybody's into the Twilight movies, and they're all a lot younger and probably haven't seen any of those films. But come on, man. There's still a lot of people left out there that love to see you on the big screen. So please, if you do another Die Hard, do it the right way and make it the last one. And make sure you get a good director, even if it's a young, well-experienced director who's a big fan of the films like Len Wiseman had done in the last movie. And just do it right. So until next time, this is the Mother Brain of the Mother Brain Files. And you can follow me on the Coast blog and view my blogs there. And you can also follow me on Twitter at MotherBrain830. And hopefully I'll be back very soon after I take some aspirin to get away from this pain that I have after a good day to Die Hard. And if you do plan to see it, go see it on DVD or on Netflix. So until next time, I'll see you at the